Welcome to the Learning Can't Wait podcast, a Full Mind production. At Full Mind, our vision is to ensure every child has access to an exceptional education. Each episode, we will be joined by pathfinders within and around the education space who are bringing about transformational change on behalf of deserving students. I am your host, Hayley Spira Bauer. Welcome back, everybody, to the Learning Can't Wait podcast. I am beyond honored and thrilled to have today's guest on this episode. We have Frances Messano, the CEO of New Schools Venture Fund, joining us today. Frances, welcome.
Thank you. It's so wonderful to be here with you, Haley.
It is fantastic having you here. I have been a close fan, follower, I don't know, of New Schools for a very long time. And I am especially thrilled to talk about your investments and your vision and just all things education and ed tech. And really just honored that you're spending your time with us today.
And I'm happy to be spending time with you. I've been following your podcast as well, and you always have really great conversations. So I'm excited for what unfolds here.
Well, I appreciate that. And I know that today's conversation is going to be broad. As we talked about kind of before we hit record, there's so much we could dive into. We'll probably need a second episode, but I won't get the cart before the horse. Why don't you jump in and tell us first, how did you come to be the personal and professional version of yourself?
Yeah, it's I love that you start with this question. And Haley, it's such a big question, right?
I
The
know.
personal and professional version of myself. I mean, there's some things I always have to start with when folks ask me to share more about like who I am and like what brings me to the work. First, I'm the daughter of determined working class immigrant drivers, both from Colombia and from Brooklyn. And so much of my life has been shaped by seeing how unevenly opportunity has been distributed in this country. So I grew up in Coney Island, Brooklyn. I know you're based in New York, and so I'm in San Francisco now. So anytime I talk to a New Yorker, I'm like, I miss you, New York. But growing up in Coney Island, and it was a working class and lower income community. So many of my friends had so much potential, but I saw that so many of them were not able to get access to the kinds of educational and professional opportunities that I wound up getting access to. And the way that I got access to them is like I got lucky in middle school. I was able to get accepted to this program called Prep for Prep that's based in New York, which basically is like a 14-month academic boot camp that helps you get a scholarship to a competitive prep school. And that golden ticket opened up all kinds of opportunity for me. It helped me to get to Harvard. It helped me to launch my career in finance, where I learned how to be an investor. And I keep looking back at like the kids I grew up with around the block, and they just didn't have the same kind of access that I had. You know, while I jumped into finance as like my first job, what I found was like kind of about 3 years into it, while I really loved the experience, it was like really hard for me to get up out of bed.
Mm.
And I think part of it was because I realized I had never chosen finance because I was like, you know, first gen college student trying to maximize opportunity. I was saying yes to what was in front of me, but never making a choice. And so, like, Teach for America did not find me on campus, is what I always say. But what I found, like, kind of 3 years into working in finance, I was struggling to get up out of bed because I realized like I wasn't living in my purpose and passion. And like it started this moment for me where I started seeking and searching for what it was that was going to really light me up. And what I found in that moment, like the things that I kept coming back to were like, oh, when I was in college, volunteering at the Philip Brooks House, where doing a lot of after-school tutoring programs, helping my mom set up for her kindergarten class each summer before the new class of students came in. Thinking about the reading that and the tutoring I was doing when I was at my lunchtime, right? And so that kind of started this process. And funny enough, it was like going to Harvard Business School and taking a class with Stacy Childress, the former leader of New Schools Venture Fund, where I had all these light bulbs going off about how someone like me from my background could play a role in education. And so that started me kind of right after business school, being on the board of Achievement First, doing some volunteer work with them. I went into consulting. I was doing it on the for-profit side, but then wound up declaring my major in education, where I started working with nonprofits and foundations, all in education on all kinds of strategy questions. And that's when I started going like, okay, this is it. This is the work that I want to do. And so, can talk more, now or another point about how that led me to new schools. But what I found was like in all those places where I was still one of the few and one of the only.
Mm,
And what that highlighted for me was that so many young people who come from like families like mine or neighborhoods like mine still had to get lucky to get a fair shot at opportunity. And so that question about how do you make it uh, no longer up to luck for a young person to find success in life? How do we actually create the beaten pathways to opportunity? That became this like animating idea for me, and that's what brought me to new schools. And the last thing I'll say is, as a parent, now I'm living it firsthand. We got 3 kids, they're attending portfolio schools. And I'm like, that also is the humbling front row seat to what it means to kind of really support education innovation as your young people are going through those new school models too.
my goodness, being a parent has humbled me, especially as an educator, in ways I never saw coming, despite feeling like I read the books. I participated in the PD, and now I'm a parent. I'm like, what was I doing? But
Yeah,
to go to your story, first of all, thank you so much for sharing your story here on the podcast. There is a theme that you mentioned a few times as you were talking that I just want to call out, which is that the luck that you had afforded you choice.
yes,
So choice for me is the be all end all in education.
absolutely.
And you really harped on that point very like not casually, but like fluidly throughout your storytelling. And it really speaks volume to what I see as new schools working towards, and also what so many dedicated education professionals are working towards, which is that our children have a choice. No matter where they are born, they
Absolutely.
are able to chart their path as they decide versus how the system dictates it.
Absolutely. Choice is freedom.
Mm,
And we all don't have access to true freedom, to truly decide how we lend our time, our talents, and contribute to this world. And I think the thing that we're most trying to figure out is how do we truly create that choice? How do we truly create that freedom? How do we truly create, environments where young people feel like they belong, like they're worthy, and that there's something for them to do, right? And so yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. And I think for me, as a young woman of color coming from a working class background, to truly feel like I do at this stage in my life have choice, like that is the biggest gift that my parents gave me, that my parents' parents also gave me, right? And it does feel like you know, I have an opportunity to pay it forward for all the investment that they've made in me.
that's really beautiful. And I just like had to pause for a second to kind of take that in. Frances, tell us a little bit about new schools for someone who's unfamiliar. I'm curious who you are, but for those who are unfamiliar, tell us a little bit about new schools before we dive into some like really clear kind of learnings from the past couple years and what you're looking at forward.
Yeah. So New Schools is a venture philanthropy. And so most people are like, what? So like if you break that down, what that means is that we are a nonprofit that raises money and then grants that money out to early stage education innovators. So basically what we do is every single year we're looking for visionary leaders with powerful ideas for making change in K-12 education. And we provide them with funding, right? So, kind of a 1-year grant to start off with, as well as technical assistance to help those visionary leaders grow their organizations, deepen their impact, and help them to really think about how they can scale their work to reach the size of the problem. And so the areas where we're funding right now are in supporting the creation of new public schools, so both charter and traditional district schools. We support learning solutions that are focused on accelerating math and literacy outcomes. And we're supporting organizations that are reimagining teaching.
Yeah, and that has evolved, right? So when I started
Yeah.
following, you had a really different kind of like thesis and attack strategy on investments. Can you talk? You've been there for quite a while. Can you talk about how that investment strategy has evolved and why?
Yeah. I have been there for a while, although I'm like, it can't be that I've been at new schools for 11 years. I'm still so young, right? Isn't that no? Is that just the way I think of myself?
Yes, you are. You are absolutely.
Young-ish, young at heart. You know, at New Schools' core, we were founded in 1998, right? So at our core, we've always been about funding schools, tools, and people. So regardless of what the category might have been, the exact focus within each of those strategies, that has always been the case, right? So like in schools, we were very involved in the early days of helping charters to get off the ground for the first time. And then
Mm,
we're trying to support them in scaling that work. And the current thesis that we have right now is we actually need fundamentally different kinds of school models. We call them innovative schools that are really thinking about how you prepare young people for the future, right? So it's centered on, yes, making sure young people have a strong academic foundation, but also have these other habits, skills, and mindsets that we know are so critical for success in life, right? And so we're seeing a lot of focus on ideas like career connected learning, dual college enrollment as examples. So, like, what are the ways in which how we are approaching schooling needs to change and shift? In learning solutions, we've had various incarnations as well, right? We used to have more of an accelerator model where we pick a topic and we say, okay, we're going to focus on ed tech to support multilingual learners, or to think about supporting in math, or maybe it's going to focus on, fill in the blank, multilingual learners. So like, you know, we now are saying we want to focus deeply on math and literacy. And of course, are thinking about the role that AI is playing as well. And then finally, on our people work, we have focused at one point in time on how do we best support teachers in terms of professional learning, recruitment efforts. We then focus on like how do we diversify the field of educators and leaders, given the deep research that demonstrates the values that accrue to young people when they're taught by diverse educators. And then now we're really thinking about how do we fundamentally shift the role of a teacher, given that the job is not sustainable, it's not working for educators, and it's not working for students. And so, how do we really think about the redesigns that are required there? So, we're constantly evolving, even though the schools, tools, people framework has been an enduring way in which we've approached our strategy.
Your 2025 annual report was called Courage to Lead. And I'm curious, what did courage actually look like on the ground this year when you're running a venture philanthropy in the middle of constrained federal resources and shifting policy? How did that feel and look, and how did courage present itself?
Yeah, I appreciate that question a lot. The first thing I would say is 2025 was a hard year for
Hmm.
leaders of all kinds.
Hmm.
It was a hard year in education and in our society. And I always want to start off with the fact that my job is not the hardest job in education, right? And so while, I had challenged and faced all kinds of things, right? Um, I think about the portfolio of leaders that we were supporting and the challenges they were facing. And so, like, to that end, one of the first things that I did to kick off 2025 was to do like a range of listening conversations with 60 members of our portfolio, because I was kind of like, I see what I'm seeing. I see what's getting me nervous and scared. Like, for example, what's happening with philanthropy right now? We're seeing like less investment in K-12 education. What's the impact of that?
Yeah.
What are the choices that I might have to make, the trade-offs I might have to make as we navigate that? Um, I'm looking at the changes coming out of the administration. And as an organization that's been so deeply focused on equity, what does this mean, right? How do we stay firm in our values? How do we stand, on the courage of our convictions, right? And still understand that the choices we make don't only impact us, but actually impact all the people who accept funding from us. So
Right.
we've had some folks say, hey, I can or I can accept your funding if you do X or you do Y, right? And so I share all that to say it's like, yeah, we were grappling with some big questions. Um, uh, and I know again that my job is not the hardest job. And so in talking with our venture community, what was coming up were, kind of lots of feedback in terms of the financial constraints they were under, the need for more support on scenario planning, the need for more guidance on understanding how the policy landscape was changing and shifting, more guidance on communications, more guidance, like on what do I do next?
Mm,
And I would say with every conversation that I had, I kind of left feeling more grounded and more convicted because I saw how courageously each one of those leaders were moving forward through the challenges that they were facing and started to view myself as a megaphone and as an amplifier for them. Right. So like I started to transition for like, oh gosh, this is really hard. I'm the CEO of New Schools too. Actually, my role is to help share what they're experiencing and to help more funders, more leaders, the broader field understand their experience. And I feel like that shift, that repositioning made me feel more courageous,
mm.
despite the scenario planning we were doing, despite the kind of uncertainty we were navigating.
In an environment like this one, what matters most is impact on students, right? So as dollars get constrained and schools make difficult decisions and ed tech companies come together or don't survive, you have to really center yourself amidst the
Yeah.
chaos
Yeah.
on students and impact. Can you talk a little bit about what New Schools demands, requires, expects from the portfolio companies in terms of how they measure impact and what type of impact you've seen that you're really proud of?
Yeah. Um, it's such an important question right now because I think in a time of constraint and when we want to see kind of more innovative ideas break through in a very, very crowded marketplace of solutions and ideas, and going back to first principles, the critical importance of impact, impact measurement is so important. It's the thing we have to be focused on. And what I would share, Hayley, is like we also work with early stage organizations. And so the
Yes.
typical organizations in our portfolio are in years 0 to 2 of development,
Mm,
right? And so it requires us to be patient, supportive capital to the ventures in our portfolio where we're trying to both hold a bar for the kinds of impact that we want to see and understanding it's going to take some time to get there. But that's why it's so important that we offer both financial support as well as the management assistance, the technical assistance support. And so what we're saying is the first step is like we're selecting organizations that have solutions. So if we're focusing on ed tech kind of specifically, we're selecting kind of these learning solutions that are starting from a place of their whole, all their work is grounded in the available research and evidence that we have, right? So like
yes.
their theory of action, their theory of impact is this is what we know works in teaching and learning, and we're building from that. So that's step one. Then step two is like, how do we support them in developing the kinds of real classroom pilots so they can actually start to get feedback from educators on their product, like the features that are working, that are not working. Is this actually, meeting a true pain point? So that they can start to do more instructional improvements. Again, we're focused on the instructional core, right? And then within that, kind of saying, how can we support in ensuring that our solutions are doing the kind of pre and post pilot evaluations so they have early indicators of success? But increasingly, and we're going to be doing some deeper work in this over time, we know we have to hold ourselves more accountable to supporting our ventures and getting increasing bodies of evidence. And so we're really thinking about what are the kinds of structured cohorts that we need to be creating where solutions are starting with, let's say the pilot data, but then moving to ESSA 4 to ESSA 2 tiers of evidence with the kind of both financial and technical support from us. And so we're really holding ourselves more accountable to that and really thinking about how our support needs to deepen in this area because impact and demonstrating impact is paramount.
And speaking of, you touched on like ed tech and tool creation and piloting, but you're seeing portfolio schools where 80% matched or outperformed similar schools in
Yeah.
reading and 75% in math. Those are really impressive
I
numbers.
love that you're sharing the data back to me. Yes, that
I
is
am.
the
I am
data.
because I'm such a nerd, Francis. Like this is what gets
Aren't
me
we all
going.
nerds? I'm a nerd. Yeah. I was like, yes,
I think
nerds
it's cool to
unite.
be a nerd. When I was in the classroom, I would tell the kids on day one in middle school, if you're not a nerd by the end of this year, I've failed at my job. So I think it's
Yeah.
really cool. So, with schools, you're seeing
Yeah.
that too. You're holding that bar there as
Absolutely.
well. Yeah.
Absolutely. And thank you for bringing that up. We absolutely are. I mean, look, if we are not having a meaningful impact, we should just close up shop and stop doing
Mm-hmm.
what we're doing, right? Because otherwise,
Mm-hmm.
what's the point? We're, as a mission-driven organization, we have to know that we're moving the needle. And again, in our schools portfolio, thank you for sharing that stat. We are seeing significant outperformance in our portfolio. And what's been exciting to me is that it counters the prevailing narrative that nothing is working in education,
Mm.
right? That we have academic loss, that we're seeing plummeting impact stats, and actually that's not true everywhere, right? And so the work that we all need to do as a field is to really think about how do we mine what's working so we can once and for all do a better job of spreading those best practices. And so yes, in our schools portfolio we are focusing on measuring a couple of things. On the academic side, we use map growth to understand how students are progressing in math and in literacy year over year, right? Because that shares, are they kind of catching up to where they should be to grade level or above? We're measuring proficiency and we're comparing their proficiency results relative to similar schools in their communities. But we're also measuring things like how are students progressing on these essential habits, mindsets, and skills, like things like growth mindset and curiosity and perseverance, which are so important for lifelong success. And then finally, measuring the strength of the school culture and environment. Like, do
Yeah.
students feel like they belong? Do students report that they have strong relationships with an adult in their building, right? Um, like all of these things are critically important to know, like, are the conditions for learning in place? And so what we've been doing is a lot of research over the last 10 plus years that demonstrate the correlations between those different categories, which show that actually focusing on all three of those categories are incredibly important to putting young people on a trajectory for true success. So we are doing all that with our schools portfolio. We are excited by the results, and also um, we are not declaring victory. There's still a
No.
lot further for us to go, but we're heading in the right direction.
Yeah. There is no end to continuous improvement. Like I'm like a huge fan of the Japanese mindset of Kaizen, of continuous improvement,
Mhm,
incremental over time.
mhm.
And I think when we feel as educators and people adjacent to education that we're done, like we've done it, then maybe it is time to move on. There is no end, right? There's always better we can be doing on behalf of kids who deserve it. So,
Absolutely. And I
agreed.
mean, like, and that's our number one job.
Right.
All of us working in education, we have to be continuous learners ourselves, right?
Hmm.
And we're trying to instill that, that practice as well with the young people we engage, right? Because it's like you don't stop.
Right.
When AI hit the scene, I mean, I know you were learning, I know I was learning. You're like, okay, there's something else I got to figure out. And I think to me, that's what really differentiates the kind of the visionary leaders who are driving towards these really impact results. It's the humility, the commitment to learning, And to knowing that we can't just say we figured it all out. There's always this next plane, that we have to explore and discover to improve.
Mhm. Agreed. Agreed. Another area that has me really, really interested is your
Mm,
teaching reimagined, imagined investment area.
yeah.
I find it super fascinating, especially as someone who is thinking day in and day out about the teacher shortage. So I'm curious, what does it look like when you reimagine the role of a teacher in a way that makes both teachers and students thrive?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, Haley. Like, I'm like, do we still have a shortage, or do we have an adult overage? I think there's like a big question right now, right?
I talk about this a lot on the podcast. Yes,
Yeah.
agreed.
Say more then.
Yeah, so Francis, there is a shortage, but not when you look holistically at numbers. There are more teachers than there are classrooms in the United States. However, talent is not evenly distributed,
That's right.
and it never has been. And frankly, the system's not designed for it to be, but that's, a later conversation for a later date. So I will say I still use the term teacher shortage because there is talent in abundance and the talent is not where it needs it most.
There's a talent allocation issue.
There you go.
A
Better.
hundred
Thank you.
percent. A
Yes.
100%. And I think, I always, I'm a student of all the data that
Yes.
Marguerite Rosa puts out at Georgetown on this,
Yes.
at both the aggregate level, but also kind of at the community district level, where you
Yeah.
can kind of get that deep kind of insight. But I think, whether it's a teacher allocation problem or a teacher shortage issue, what we have is a workforce design problem.
Mm,
And that is the core of how we're thinking about the issue at new
mm.
schools, because you were an educator, right? You were in the classroom. You understand this, right? Like, in this dynamic world that we're living in, where work has changed. I mean, like, I used to show up in an office every single day. Now I'm a remote worker, as one example of the range of changes we've all experienced, right? Teaching has largely stayed the same.
Yeah.
It's the it's the kind of same role. It's an individual role. It's an isolated role, right?
Hmm.
It is a kind of same schedule, same hours, inflexible role. And we know that teacher burnout is high. We know that pay has declined in real terms. And we know that turnover is highest in the communities with the highest need students.
Yes.
And so what we know is, like, this is not a question about individual resilience, right? Like, can this one teacher dig it out and find a way to sustain? It's like we have an outdated model of the job, and we actually need to
Mhm.
think differently about it. And so what we're saying is, how might we play a role in redesigning what teachers do? And so part of it is like, how can time be used differently? How can teacher teams be structured to kind of bust some of that isolation that exists? How can decision making be shared across a group of educators, right? So having more distributed leadership models. How can we make sure that feedback and coaching happens more regularly? And how do we think about making teaching, like, like, kind of like broadening how we think about who a teacher is, right? When you think about all the expertise that exists in a local community, whether it's a scientist working in a research lab, whether it's the kind of history museum docent, whether it's like, how do we start thinking about all the expertise that lives in a community that can actually play a role in supporting students, parents, grandparents, caregivers of different kinds? And so how do we actually think about broadening the range of roles that adults can play to help make teaching more sustainable, and to also think about how we can really support student success in a different kind of way. And so that's like kind of how we are thinking about it. We're also thinking about the role of AI. So a lot of those things that I mentioned, like, there's a role for AI to play in supporting teacher effectiveness and in supporting time saving, right? And so we're kind of thinking about this question from all those angles.
Yeah, I really appreciate that perspective, and I agree with exactly your phrasing on the huge upside to introducing artificial intelligence in school settings. I know one of the things on my mind today, just after the ASU GSB summit last week, is this really kind of dichotomous debate that's happening right now about tech backlash in
Mm,
America,
mm.
while we're also having this like extreme excitement and forward-looking view into
Yeah.
how AI can look in schools. Are you hearing that too from your seat in the house?
Oh yeah. Of
Yeah.
course we're hearing the tech backlash.
Yeah.
I think the risk that we run right now, anytime we kind of say something is all good or something is all bad, right? Is like
Yeah.
we've created a false binary. And what I would say is there are a lot of low quality tools that we need to kind of get out of classrooms.
Yes.
And there are high quality tools grounded in data and evidence that it works if used, if implemented well, which we know we have a huge implementation problem, right?
The research to practice gap is, I think, one of
Significant.
the biggest topics that we're not giving enough attention to. But again, pause that, keep going.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so I just think we're at a risk of just like throwing everything out, right? With kind of especially like the emerging policy landscape that we're in. And I think we just need to be nuanced, but I actually think we need to be more nuanced everywhere right now in our world and our society. And
Yeah.
to say like how do we play a deeper role in in advancing what is working, right? Because this task of the range of needs in the typical classroom is something that humbles me so much, right?
Yeah.
When you think about in a classroom of 30 students, you know, 1 in 5 students is has a diagnosed or undiagnosed disability. You think about 1 in 10 students, they're learning English. You think about the average student being somewhere between 6 to 12 months behind, and that's an average stat where we know there might be 3 to 5 different grade levels in a classroom, right? Like, how do we get to the level of personalization, to the level of differentiation, to the place where every young person can be on a pathway to acquiring the knowledge and skills they need without tech support? We're going to need some solutions to help us to really wrap our arms around every single young person, but we have to stop using the tools that don't work, that are ineffective. And we don't have a great way of doing that across the 13,000 plus districts in this country. So I'm like, let's not just say no ed tech. Let's say only the best ed tech.
Yeah. No.
Like that's where I feel like we have to get to.
I wrote about this in my newsletter yesterday. I think there's also this like nuanced question to your point about supplemental versus core that
Yes.
we're not digging into either, which is very important. But first and foremost, I actually think is the point that you made, which is quality, right? Quality should trump everything. So we could talk first quality, then we could talk about use and implementation and all of those pieces, but it is such an important conversation. As a parent, I feel it, Frances. Like
Yeah.
my kids tell me stories about how they're using tech in the classroom, and I'm like, that is so ineffective. It's so ineffective. And I know teachers are doing their best.
Yeah.
I know schools are doing their best. And we have a systemic kind of challenge that's facing us
Yeah.
that we really need to address.
Well, I mean, you start to get to this point when you start talking about implementation. It's like we have to shift from this idea of we're just going to create a tool and then we can like plop it into a classroom and it's going to go
Mm,
well. Most schools, most school leaders, most educators actually need the supports to be able to think about how to fully integrate it.
hmm.
And I think one of the trends that I'm really excited about is the fact that we're seeing more supplemental tools establish partnerships with high quality instructional curriculum providers and
Yes.
thinking more about the bundles of support, you know, these integrated coherent bundles that actually get us to the kinds of teaching and learning that we want to see, right? And so that is a trend that I think is exciting. Because you're right, more, just more individual supplemental tools. It's not going to help us get to where we need to be, but we
Yeah.
have to start someplace on the innovation side, and then potentially support more of those kinds of longer term partnerships.
As I predicted, Frances, I could have this conversation for days with you. And, I am going to have us wrap up with our final question, but there are so many brilliant points you've made here, and we haven't even talked in depth about like the highlights of your last year. So you'll have to come back another time, but I will ask you.
I'd love to.
I will ask you for folks that are just starting out, what advice would you give an ed tech founder, a school founder, someone who
Yeah.
might be just starting on this path? What would you tell them?
Mm. So many things, so many things, some of which we touched on. The first is like, you don't have to do this work alone. I think we're past this point of like the heroic individual is going to figure it all out. Like what we see is like the teams that are the strongest are the ones that have the vision, the strong visionary lead, the strong instructional lead. If you're an ed tech
Hmm.
platform, the technologist, right? And the operational lead. And sometimes that's three people, maybe it's two, but it's certainly not one.
Right.
So, like, how do you think about doing this work, right? Where you have all the skills, the expertise around you, right? And that this is not something you're doing on your own.
Yeah.
I would say co-create with the people you seek to serve. Um, we can't just create ideas in a vacuum and hope it's going to be adopted. Think about who that student is or those group of students that you really want to help on their educational and life journey, and design with them. Design with the family members around them, right? We need
Yeah.
grounded solutions. Design with educators if you're an ed tech
Mhm.
solution, right? We need grounded solutions addressing real world problems and aspirations, right? And so I think getting that feedback early on is so critically important. And then, we kind of talked about this as well, about being a constant learner.
Yeah.
Be humble. You don't
Mm.
know everything. That's okay. But learn, right? And figure out like who you're learning from, right? The work of entrepreneurship is all about constant iteration, new inputs, more feedback, and then thinking about what of that to take in, what of it to release and say thanks. But like I think about that as well. And I think a through line across all of that is just it's relationships. The work moves at the speed of trust, and like really think about the broader community that's around you. And so to all the folks starting off, like I thank you for being a visionary leader, for stepping out, to share a new idea, to dream a big dream that's bigger than yourself, because we need that kind of energy right now to help us face the biggest challenges in this disruptive moment in education.
That's a solid closure right there. Frances, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and just being so brilliant and sharing so much of your story, but also the work you're doing. It really was a pleasure having you on as a guest.
Great to talk with you, Hayley. And I might take you up on that part two. It's like,
Part
where
two.
shall we go next?
Don't have to tell me twice. And
Great
thank
stuff.
you for everybody tuning in today.
Thanks for listening to the Learning Can't Wait podcast. If you like what you heard, please rate, review, and share this episode. Be the first to know when we have a new episode by subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to be a guest on the show or have a suggestion for an episode, email us at podcast@fullmindlearning.com.